This is a truly unique film. Mao Zedong, Zhou Enlai, and other senior leaders appeared in it. It depicts the founding of the People's Republic of China. Co-produced by China and the Soviet Union, it set a box office record when it was released. Join us for Part 8 of China on Film. This is a scene Chinese people are very familiar with. At 3 p.m. on October 1st, 1949, accompanied by senior leaders of the Communist Party and other influential people, Mao Zedong declared, In fact, there was also some color footage of this famous scene. Facing a crowd of people in the square, Mao Zedong raised his hand in salute to them. On his side, a camera records his viewpoint. The cameraman turned the camera to capture Mao's facial expression. The left-hand corner of this footage shows that another camera was also present. There were 2 camera teams that day, and they were both caught in each other's shots. One of the cameramen explains why.
这个是冯局长齐建元，这个是我，关明国。徐小平是我们摄影队的大队长，我给他当助理。这个大机器是拍故事片用的，它可以同时录音用的，那么当时呢，就是临时把它调过来。
At that time, Guan Minggor was 20 years old. He'd been trained in the Northeast Film Studio the previous year. This time, he was serving as an assistant cameraman.
当时我们住在中南海里头，这是出入证，中南海的出入证，这就是我，这是新闻处电影科。
On the day of the founding ceremony, Cao Zorbin followed cameraman Xu Lai and filmed from the Western Review stand.
因为我当时在开国大典的时候，我就在天安门底下，观礼塔也很近离天安门。苏联摄影师穿个大花衬衣，就他显眼。那个苏联说拿这个机器在那拍，这边呢，在咱们也有一台摄影机也在拍。
The Soviet camera crew had arrived in Beijing the night before the founding ceremony. They used color film, which was quite scarce in China back then. Both the Chinese team and the Soviet team mounted their Mitchell cameras on both sides of the rostrum. This type of camera had 2 film mags. One was used to hold the unexposed film, while the other was for the exposed film. One roll of film was 1,000 feet long, giving a running time of 10 minutes. The camera could also record sync sound. It was the most advanced camera of the time. In 1952, its designer, George Mitchell, won an honorary Academy Award for his contribution to film technology. The Soviet cameramen applied for the right to do some mobile filming in the morning, but were refused. Chinese cameraman Xu Xiaobing and Wu Benli used portable IMO cameras to shoot on the fly. What's more, each of them was equipped with 2 cameras.
徐小平他拿个小机器呢，带旁毛主席近景啊、中景啊来前面，他就要跨过那个栏杆踩那个边儿，那么呢很危险。我呢就要拽着他的皮带，拉着他，我来里头。当时总理呢还说：“哎呦，小平你小心点啊，注意安全。”
20-year-old Li Jianyu and Guan Minggor were accepted into the Northeast Film Studio the same year and worked as assistant cameramen.
我的摄影师叫吴本利，我给他当摄影助理。那个时候就只能拍1分多钟的片子，那他那个拍完了以后，我就赶紧的递给他第2个机器，赶紧这找个地方跑上去换胶片，
把机器放到那个黑口袋里头，手呢在里头操作。
换的没拍的胶片，把拍过的胶片把它收起来。
The Soviet cameramen couldn't put their skills to the fullest use upon Tiananmen Gate, so they arranged to send 3 groups of cameramen into the square. They captured the vivid facial expressions of the people. This well-equipped camera crew, consisting of 30 members, did an excellent job of filming the founding ceremony of the PRC. In the spring of 1949, when the Communist Party of China's victory in the Civil War was certain, Stalin suggested making 2 films about the Chinese Revolution. The Soviet Union once had helped some socialist countries make the film. Mao immediately asked the Central Administration of Film to send an invitation to the Soviets. The Soviet Union dispatched director Leonid Varlamov, who was famous for making war documentaries. He had won the Stalin Prize 4 times.
国庆节过后，给苏联摄影师当的摄影助理，就开始帮助他们工作了，所以一直的工作了6、7个月吧，在一起。
China equipped the Soviet camera crew with a powerful lineup of talent. Liu Shaoqi, vice chairman of the PRC, served as the general director. Wu Benli was assistant director, and writer Liu Baiyu was appointed consultant. To strengthen the heroic image of the Liberation Army, Mao ordered the Central Military Commission to mobilize the field armies to reenact the 4 great battles. The Soviet camera crew was divided into 4 groups. 2 groups went to southwest China and the southeastern coastal area. Liu Baiyu led another group for the reenactment of 2 other campaigns. The final group was led by Chief Director Varlamov. They reenacted the Crossing the Yangtze River campaign. Authenticity was his philosophy, so he decided to reenact this battle first, ensuring that they were shooting in the historically correct season.
我跟那个摄影师叫米科沙，他们要求呢，要原来的部队在原来的地方来参加补拍，所以呢，很多部队都是从沈阳调过来的。炮弹的爆炸什么的都是用炸药包，3个水柱子起来用这个3个炸药包，炸药包的大小可以决定水柱子炸出来的高低。
The Soviet cameramen paid special attention to the composition of the scenes. The attacking soldiers had to be in a certain formation. The cannons had to be in line. Even war shouldn't violate aesthetic principles. Wu Benli, the Chinese director, said that the real battles hadn't involved so many artillerymen. What's more, he offered tips on the placement of the heavy artillery that was in accordance with the original situation. The Soviet cameramen listened to all this. In fact, the crossing of the Yangtze River campaign began at 11 p.m. The Kuomintang's principal forces had already been transferred to Shanghai. The battle was not very fierce. Li Jianyu, who had filmed this campaign, later recalled.
那天是晚上，大场面都没有拍到，战斗场面不多，追上去就是胜利，就是追上去就能把他逮着。
Li Zongren had been the acting president of the national government. He later recalled that when the defenders saw the Liberation Army disembark, they either fled or surrendered. The Liberation Army encountered little resistance. In this scene, the camera has some complex movements, displaying Varlamov's deep understanding of film language. The lowering of the nationalist government's flag symbolized the demise of the Kuomintang regime. The soldier taking down the flag was a genuine hero. Since the release of the film Battleship Potemkin in 1925, the montage editing technique has been a prominent characteristic of Soviet documentary films. Varlamov used it frequently in this film. The long tracking shot was considered to be a particular stroke of genius. When the director saw the long corridor leading to the office of the president, he mounted the camera on a dolly and sent it all the way down the corridor towards Chiang Kai-shek's office. In 1993, Russian director Nikita Mikhailov also used this technique when making the documentary Anna. The Dziga Vetrov referred to filmmaking as advanced algebra.
在技术上的要求是挺严格的，自己满意以后你才能拍。
我跟那个摄影师叫季舍廖夫，每天工作完了，把当天拍的那个片头啊剪一点呢，他有个黑的叫糖盒，放那里头来洗片头，看看我今天拍的怎么样，光线合适不合适，颜色对不对。
Sergei Eisenstein used color tinting for the first time in 1925. When Battleship Potemkin was shown, the audience was surprised to see red flags waving on the screen. Eisenstein had the film colored, frame by frame. In 1944, he received further inspiration when editing the final scenes of Ivan the Terrible. When the singing and dancing began at Ivan's command, the film suddenly changes from black and white to color. The continuity errors were inevitable, such as this flag appearing at the time when it couldn't possibly have existed.
补排的时候啊，部队把这个军旗就也带过来了。
我觉得以后中国纪录片很长时间就是受他们那个影响，摆拍、复拍，组织好的拍摄、画面的拍摄。
Varlamov was both talented and ill-tempered. Chen Rong was a director who frequently worked with him. She recalled that Varlamov asked almost too much from the extras. Their acting wasn't up to his standards. He would often erupt in anger at them. Chen argued with him about such outbursts. With Soviet films as a model, post-1929 Chinese documentaries used reenactments as part of the narrative. All the scenes in the film Turksib were reenactments. The scenes were shot like a dramatic film and edited like one as well. At the very end of the film, there's a scene showing horses racing along beside a train. This was a romantic invention that went beyond the boundaries of documentary. The board bearing the Chinese characters, "Fight for the Oppressed," was specially made. The Soviet cameramen asked the soldiers to cross in front of the board when they charged. Bags bearing the words were also made. These were creative embellishments that were added, but in reality, such signs and slogans were not true to life.
州城下的攻坚战已经准备好，林彪将军在前线指挥作战。
Lin Biao was the commander of the 4th Field Army. He traveled to the battlefield to take part in the filming. He sent the troops who had fought in the original battle to take part in the filming. The soldiers were so devoted to their performance that a few were injured during the shoot. Lin also gave the crew access to film from an airplane. Such scenes highlighted the heroic spirit consistent with the Soviet films of the time.
一切的人力都动员起来了，所有的交通工具也动员起来了。
At that time, neo-realism was emerging in Italy. The Bicycle Thieves was shown in 1948. In 1950, French director Alain Resnais made the documentary Guernica. The film was inspired by Picasso's painting of the same name and condemned the bombing, which took place in Spain in 1937. In 1955, he made the documentary Night and Fog. At that time, reflecting on war became an important theme of documentaries.
Le chêne de Goethe à Buchenwald. On a construit le camp autour, mais on a respecté le chêne. Un orphelinat éphémère, constamment renouvelé. Un bloc des invalides. Alors le monde véritable, celui des paysages calmes, celui du temps d'avant, peut bien apparaître au loin, pas si loin. Pour le déporter, c'était une image.
At that time, the founder of the Soviet School of Montage, Sergei Eisenstein, was criticized for his film Ivan the Terrible. Critics said it suggested that Stalin was in some way a tyrant like Ivan. Dziga Vertov had been the founder of the Cine-I theory, but found himself accused of formalism and lost the right to make films altogether. He became an ordinary editor.
The country was completely
During the filming of Victory of the Chinese People, Mao Zedong was on a trip to Moscow. He was busy signing the Sino-Soviet Treaty of Friendship, Alliance, and Mutual Assistance. After World War II, the Cold War broke out between East and West.
The Soviet Union sought to impose communism, ever-expanding ring of countries. 1948.
One day in March 1950, the citizens of Qianmen District in Beijing were mobilized to welcome the Liberation Army into the city. They were surprised to see Lin Biao, Nie Rongchen, Luo Ronghuan, and other senior generals reviewing the army. It turned out that the Soviet camera crew was shooting a reenactment of the ceremony. Just 1 year before, cameraman Xia Yimin had shot the real scene.
林彪将军、罗荣华将军、聂荣臻将军等在前门箭楼亲临检阅。
我呢就在那前面楼下边拍摄，就那一个机器家跑上跑下，有人抱着个电线杆子，一个手也得那挨不轻啊，群众是很热烈的，说很多那年轻人、大学生跑在那个大炮上边，欢迎解放，这个配合写着个什么解放了，底下有秧歌唱歌。
For Soviet directors, reenactment and montage were indispensable tools.
北平也有不愉快的地方，也有紧紧关闭着的大门，这是美国大使馆的大门；也有这样的旗子，垂头丧气的旗子，这是美国的旗子。
On February 3, 1949, a Chinese cameraman recorded the real scene of the Liberation Army passing through a lane in Beijing. It was windy that day. The flag of the U.S. Embassy was waving in the air. The Soviet directors used montage to lend political subtext to this shot. The Soviet camera crews filming in China lasted for 8 months. 16 cameramen and dozens of assistant cameramen were involved in the work. Over 10,000 soldiers from 4 field armies were mobilized. Real guns and bullets were used during the filming. Even Hollywood blockbusters couldn't compete with such scale. Wu Benli, the vice director, recalled that he had seen a budget of 5 million yuan for filming. In the past, when he'd been involved in filming, he'd used film stock very sparingly. To him, this film was extravagant. The cast of Victory of the Chinese People was without equal. Mao Zedong, Liu Shaoqi, Zhou Enlai, Zhu De, Peng Dehuai, Lin Biao, Liu Bocheng, Deng Xiaoping, Ha Long, and other senior leaders all participated in the filming. In one sense, this film was a Stalin and Mao co-production with Liu Shaoqi as its producer. In May 1950, the filming was almost finished. On May 24th, Liu Shaoqi sent a telegram to Varlamov through the Chinese ambassador to the Soviet Union. The telegram was from China's Central Committee, requesting a chance to carry out a final review of the film. In July 1950, a reviewing meeting for the film was held in Beijing. Mao Zedong, Zhou Enlai, Zhu De, and Liu Shaoqi were all present.
天气这就是大热天，出现了骂声大喊，秘书呢就跟着他给他上扇子。
The hot-tempered Soviet director, Varlamov, and Chinese director, Wu Benli, stood beside them nervously. Wu still remembers their unease. The Soviet director and I stood beside them and wondered if the film would pass censorship. When the film ended, the chairman said it was good and that it had passed.
战争刚过去2年，人的那种记忆还保留，人的情绪还保留，人的面貌还大体跟那个差不多。应该说，在那个阶段做完这件事儿，我觉得对历史保留还是有价值的。这是一部有价值的纪录片。
The film was awarded the Stalin Prize and also brought Varlamov the friendship of the Chinese nation. 8 years later, when the Chinese delegation visited the Soviet Union, they found upon visiting the director's house that many Chinese had given him gifts of appreciation during the shoot. In 1950, the China Film Corporation released this film. It became the best-selling film that year. Popular Cinema had a special issue devoted to it. In the following 17 years, China imported a total of 857 foreign films, of which 49% were Soviet films. These days, the popularity of film has faded, but there is no doubt that the films and filmmaking techniques of the Soviet Union shaped the Chinese movie industry in the decades following the founding of the PRC.